Welcome to the Andy Staples Show. We are headed to Big Ten country. That is Scott Dochterman. If you're watching on the YouTube feed, that is Scott Dochterman with the Johnny Cash shirt on in his office. Ari Wasserman is here. We split up the SEC teams for 2024 with their 3 permanent opponents. We're going to do the same with the Big Ten teams today. But before we do that, Scott is here. And we have not had Scott on the show since that magical day when the greatest contract addendum in the history of the world came out. Brian Ferentz back for another year as Iowa's offensive coordinator. But the contract terminates if Iowa either does not win at least 7 games or does not average 25 points a game. And also, Phil Parker's defense, their scoring also counts in the average.
It's an amazing contract. And the fact that it came out 5 days after Kirk said that he didn't foresee any changes on the staff, it's another ready, shoot, aim from the Iowa athletic department, because this is the type of thing, just get it out of the way once and don't have to talk about it again. But now we get to talk about it again, because otherwise it would have went under the radar on the second National Signing Day and all the portal talk. Instead, on a brilliant Monday of last week, we get, oh yeah, here's 3 new pages to Brian's contract, including the termination date if they don't average 25 points or get to 7 wins. And it's interesting because they have a 2-year automatic rollover for every assistant who's been there a year. And so they stopped the rollover to make sure that they could fire Brian Ferentz. This is the only way I think that Gary Barta could say he has a win in this situation, because having Kirk there, he can't apply the pressure to force him out. They're the longest duo together, AD coach in the country. And yet Kirk remains steadfast. He wasn't going to fire Brian. So this is somewhat of a win, but it's a weird spin on the season. And now everybody's going to have charts. I probably should put one up there instead of my old high school.
Well, we're going to have a graphic. If you watch this on the YouTube stream, we'll have a graphic in the maybe upper right-hand corner. I don't know. That's where we usually put the show
on every
logo.
show, not just the ones that we're talking about.
So it'll start at 325. And every point they score, we will subtract a point. And so, yes, on a random Wednesday show, we could be talking about Boise State, but it's on a random Wednesday in October, it's going to say something like 234 points.
Okay,
in the corner.
So Scott, I just want to ask you 2 questions in a non-funny way. Like, I'm genuinely curious. So you covered it, and you were in the thick of it last year as a serious, very good journalist, and not grab-assily like we were on the podcast. How surprised are you?
What part of speech is grab-assily before we move on?
I don't know. There'll be somebody in the comments here to correct my grammar.
Adjective there, a compound adjective.
But like, are you surprised by this, or is this like, because everybody's like, oh, the least surprising thing in the world, he was never going to do it, blah, blah, blah. But like, did you think that there was a chance he was going to do it? And then the second part is how are you doing personally? Like, are you happy about this? Are you annoyed by it? Does it make it more interesting, less interesting? Like, I want to know like how Scott Dochterman is actually feeling about it.
Well, thank you for your concerns. I guess I'll start with the first part. And I was surprised because I thought Brian would find his way back into the NFL. Some of the things that he does well, I've said it before, he is an outstanding offensive line coach. He did a great job with Iowa. I did a 5-question topical thing on Sunday with Rob Gronkowski. He taught Gronk how to block, and Gronk went off just saying how great Brian was and teaching him how to do it the right way and everything like that. So it's kind of the Peter principle here. Coordinating the offense wasn't real good, but they had a lot of bad parts to go along with it. I figured Brian would get back to the NFL, maybe rejoin his Patriots. Bill O'Brien and he are really close. He worked for Bill Belichick as his dad did back in the early 90s. So I guess I am a little bit surprised that he is back in this role.
Can I raise my hand and ask a question here? You mentioned that Brian Ferentz is a great offensive line coach, and he's recognized as a great offensive line coach. It is possible to be the offensive coordinator and the offensive line coach. Why does he coach the quarterbacks who have not been good at playing quarterback? Maybe they can block. Maybe they're the best blocking quarterbacks in the world.
Yeah, they've had two under his watch, and here's why I can see some of this, and this is the bigger picture. His first quarterback was Nate Stanley, who threw 68 touchdown passes for 3 years. It was 13th in Big Ten
in college football now, good quarterbacks throw like 40 in a year.
But at the time, it was 13th in Big Ten history. So, he had some success. The last 3 years combined, Spencer Petras, largely the quarterback, they've thrown 28. So quarterback does have a big impact. And the fact that they went to the transfer portal and grabbed Cade McNamara, I think should improve that position greatly. So, that's part of it there. And yes, he could probably do that, but in Kirk Ferentz's world, he wants somebody strictly to work with the offensive line. And what doomed Iowa even more than the quarterback play last year was they had two classes pretty much completely wiped out, the 18 and 19 classes. They had one scholarship guy still on the roster in the 2 deep last year, and he was marginal at best. So they were basically going from sophomore and younger in that group, and that's why they failed to even get a running game, because I think
they had a great offensive line coach on the staff who could coach them up.
And head coach too.
Yeah.
He's a guru as well. So they had young players who were developmental. They didn't have any older veterans. Had they had them, because Iowa usually would have like one stud, a couple of seniors who were try-hard guys who got it at the end. They didn't have any of them. But to their credit, they did go to the portal. They grabbed 2 guys that one has a pretty good starter kit, and the other one looks like he'll step in and play right away.
Well, here's my thing about this, and we were talking about this before we started recording. This is only interesting if the defense remains really good. Like, if the defense is mediocre or less, which I don't think it'll ever be, or less with Phil Parker there, but if the defense is mediocre and the offense remains bad, then they're just a bad team.
Well, this can't happen because Iowa's defensive staff is so good, but wouldn't it be hilarious if Iowa averaged 39 points a game offensively this year, but their defense was terrible, and they lost. They lost this. They were 6-6, and they lost their last game of the year because their defense gave up 53 points. Then what happens?
Yeah, they lose a 53-50 shootout to Nebraska in the last game of the season.
When you think about all the possibilities of how this could go completely off the rails, that's probably on the lower end of likely, yeah. But there are a lot of very funny scenarios as it pertains to how that contract is written, that by the letter of the law, that contract might not be in the spirit of what they're hoping for, and it still not matter. So I'm high alert. Iowa is must watch this year. And is that a good thing, Scott? You didn't answer me. Are you happy, or are you just oh God, I can't watch this on the road in the winter 6 more times?
I actually think they'll be decent on offense. I'm not going to go as far as to say good or vastly improved or any of that happy horse, you know what? But I do think that they'll be better. I mean, they added six new starters in the transfer portal, and so they did it the smart way this time around. But will that make them must-watch TV? Probably not. If they're say 8-2, they'll probably just be another nice team that shows up every week on the rankings, and their defense will be elite again. It may even be better statistically than they were last year. And last year they held 9 opponents to 10 points or less. They lost 2 of those games. But what fascinating look will be what happened in the scenario against Wisconsin. I think they had 151 yards of total offense. They won 24-10. But that's 24 points, right? Well, they did have the ball at the Wisconsin 20-yard line, and they took, they just kind of handed it off and ended the game. Now, they may end up kicking a field goal to get to 27.
That's the part that fascinates me, is how many just sad touchdowns and field goals will get scored to make sure that this contract doesn't terminate.
Well, the thing that stinks is the worst possible outcome for the fans would be 9-3 or a 10-2 team that averages 26 points a game, and it's just like normal Iowa good, because if we just get what's made them good again, because like the way that the contract is written, Scott, and you know this, if they added 6 new pieces and you think they'll be marginally better or visibly improved, the benchmark of what he has to attain is so low that like he could still be mediocre.
Right.
And hard to watch, but also not interesting enough to lose his job. So like the idea of like being right in the sweet spot of not awful, but not good, but good enough to reach those minuscule numbers that 75 other coaches have, or 75 other programs reached a year ago, then it just be like Iowa football that we've come to know. Like I either want them to be amazing so we can talk about like the turnaround or the unthinkable, or I want them to be the worst offense in the history of assembled football.
I also want Brian,
year,
if they happen to be amazing, I want Brian Ferentz to be absolutely insufferable, because I know.
I would be.
If I spent last year with all of us idiots telling me how terrible I am at my job, and suddenly everything turned around, I would be rubbing it in your faces constantly.
But you know what's going to happen? We're going to hype it up all offseason, and Iowa's going to go 10-2. And they're going to average 26.9 points a game, and their defense is going to be awesome. Their only 2 losses are going to be against the 2 top-tier teams in the Big Ten. They're going to backdoor their way into the Big Ten championship game, and it's just going to be the most Iowa season ever, and then nothing is going to change.
Well, whoa. What if they get shut out in the Big Ten championship game, and that drops them below the average, and they can't make it up in the bowl game?
I don't know. They'll block a few punts and run them in the Big Ten championship game.
I mean,
it's possible.
Phil Parker has to start asking Brian to slip him some cash at that point, right?
Well, there was a reason why last year. I mean, they were at a comparable level pay wise, and then last year I think Kirk got it and gave Phil a $400,000 raise, and then Brian I think got a $60K raise, and then of course this year he got knocked down another $50K, which actually was more like a $120,000 drop, because he would have normally got an 8% raise just from going to a bowl game. But you look at like Iowa's first opponent is Utah State, and last year they were 105th in scoring, defense, and had the most penalties of any. So
Iowa's going to roll up 32 points against them.
It might be a little more than that, because they'll get 3 pick sixes, but I mean, last year, 24% of their touchdowns came on defense. They had 6 defensive touchdowns, and they have some pretty good players.
My favorite part of it is those count for Brian Ferentz.
It shouldn't count. It should be offensive points. And the thing that we're not accounting for too is how many times Iowa turns the other team over deep in their territory, and then Iowa could get a layup touchdown.
Well, Brody King in the chat, Barta has already won Iowa's must-see TV. If they're close, that Nebraska game becomes the highest-rated game in Iowa history. It would be the highest-rated game in the history of the Big Ten Network, because they always take that Black Friday game on the Big Ten Network.
Not this year. This year it's going to be CBS, baby.
What?
What? It's a CBS or NBC. Maybe NBC wants it at prime time, over in Lincoln, and
can you even imagine the drive for 325?
Yep.
In prime time.
If you polled Iowa fans, I bet you they would want this to be a terrible year.
There is a strong sentiment in that factor. I mean, when Kirk announced he came back, I just hid my replies because I didn't want to see them. And then
let's check in on our favorite Iowa fan listener / viewer, Vaughn. This is torture.
It is torture.
That about sums it up.
Well, I tell you, Ari, you asked me how I was doing. Let's put it this way. When I was down in Nashville, and the day before the game, I ran into Brian, and he actually came up to me and goes, "Man, I feel sorry for you." And it's not so much that I had to watch his offense all year. It was more that we get drug on Twitter and other things that were Iowa reporters for not asking the tough questions. Well, we do. We just don't like the answers, and we can't affect change. I mean, this is the one place. This isn't like Auburn where you can just.
Did you just say that Brian Ferentz said he felt bad for you?
Yeah. I'm like,
hey, what a mensch.
Hey,
yeah.
Okay.
What a mensch.
Okay.
Wow. So, but the not asking the tough questions part is hilarious to me, because you guys have asked it every way you can possibly ask it. Like, I know everybody wants it to be those Mike Wallace 60 Minutes
Mhm.
interview where the subject finally cracks and starts crying. It's like, I admit it. I was lying. That doesn't happen in the real world. Like Kirk
No.
Ferentz is not going to get up in a press conference and go, you know what? You guys were right. This was terrible.
I mean, he
This was
wrote
bad
a
idea.
contract that his son could not fail at, I think.
Mhm.
So
It-
the
you
way
know,
the contract is written, it means that he's made up his mind already for the future.
what people want is, Kirk to sit there like Colonel Nathan Jessup on A Few Good Men, and I'm Tom Cruise. Why don't you fire Brian? That's what people want.
I mean, they got it. They got it from Doug.
You want Brian on that play call sheet. You need Brian on that play call
Yeah.
sheet.
Doug got
he got Kirk a little
spicy.
bit riled
You know,
up.
you not that you didn't ask the questions, you did.
All
but
right,
like
so Andrew in the chat, stealing Ari's bit, asks Vaughn a would you rather. Would you take not making a bowl for 3 years if it meant Iowa would have a top 30 offense for the next 10 years?
I think he would do it
I think any Iowa fan would take that.
because that means for those 10 years, top 30 offense would be a team that could maybe win the Big Ten.
And also those 10 probably lead into more top 30 offenses and even better teams.
Vaughn's like, yeah.
Vaughn says yes. Vaughn's in. So
No, he said it like with the depressed spelling. Yeah.
Brody with the greatest question in the chat. When they reach 325 points, does Brian get a Gatorade bath mid-game?
What color would the Gatorade be?
Oh, it'd be clear. I mean, there's no question.
No,
I think it would be green.
Here's what I want.
Like money.
You know, like the game shows where they have the pyramid of cash, like just sitting there, like this is what you could win. I think Brian's annual salary for 2024 should be brought out, like wheeled out in small denominations, ones, tens, like giant stacks
And
onto the field the moment they hit 325.
or one of those like dodgeball treasure chests at the end of that movie.
Yes, exactly.
Well, if they hit it at the last home game, because the last game will be at Nebraska, but if they hit it at that Illinois game, they should just bring out these big fans.
I want it, bro. Yes, like a money cannon.
Yes, and everybody's grabbing it for Brian.
This is awesome. This is amazing. I cannot wait. All right. Enough. We've made Scott suffer enough. We promised we would not make him suffer all day today. So we're going to tap into another one of his areas of expertise, and that is the Big Ten schedule, because we did this with the SEC on Tuesday's show where we picked the 3 fixed opponents for each team starting in 2024. The Big Ten should probably have a similar schedule coming up. They're trying to figure out what to do. So when we come back, we are picking every Big Ten team's 3 fixed opponents. I'm sticking to my ethos that I switched to during our SEC show. I'm just making blockbusters, baby. Forget tradition. Give me the blockbusters. We'll be right back. Today, I woke up stiff and tired and feeling very, very old. What did I need to do? I needed to stretch. So what did I do? I opened up my Peloton app. I found a 10-minute Callie Gullickson stretching workout. 10 minutes later, I felt fantastic. I felt 10 years younger. That's what Peloton can do for you. It's not just the bike. It's not just the treadmill. It's not always a workout that leaves you breathless and panting, but sometimes it is, and sometimes you need that. But sometimes it's just stretching, or it's yoga, or it's exactly what you need when you need it. That's the best thing about Peloton. One day I'm running hard with Marcel Dinkins. There's trap music playing. The next day, Matt Wilper's country, just an easy jog. It's what you need when you need it. And you can mix it up, and nothing gets you moving like Peloton. You do not have to be a superior athlete to enjoy Peloton, because there are classes for every level. Whether you exercise daily or you're new to working out, Peloton can help you achieve your fitness goals. So try Peloton risk-free with a 30-day home trial. New members only, not available in remote locations. See additional terms at onepeloton.com/home-trial. That's onepeloton.com/home-trial. Whatever you need, when you need it, they got it. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Take me. I was like the 7th choice for my first job. If they'd had LinkedIn Jobs back then, they'd have found somebody more qualified than me. Here's how you do it. You add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to and faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/Andy. That's linkedin.com/Andy to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn.com/Andy. Welcome back. So we did this for the SEC early this week with Seth Emerson, our Georgia beat writer. Now Scott is going to help us do this for the Big Ten. Scott, I feel like this is a little bit easier than the SEC just because there's not as it doesn't feel like there's as many, like it feels like there's a lot more history for more schools, but there's not as many kind of hard and fast, like if you do this, this is the end of this rules. I feel like if you got a good traveling trophy, there's a good chance you're going to get to play a game still. And, other than that, let's make some blockbusters. So we started the SEC with Texas because it was the easiest one to just populate the 3.
But Texas also was the team that made the rest of the conference more complicated because it took up spots from A&M and other schools. Like we don't have the new additions to the Big Ten, and USC and UCLA don't have any existing geographical rivals in this conference already.
Right.
So it gives them more we have more wiggle room to make it work based on putting them wherever we feel is best.
Like in Texas coming in brings one of its rivals with it, Oklahoma, and then reunites with 2 really hated rivals in A&M and Arkansas. So that made that very easy. But should we start with just the 2 blockbuster teams, the ones that drive the ratings, Ohio State,
Iowa?
Michigan?
Oh, Ohio State.
Well, Iowa's going to drive the ratings this year for sure.
Yeah. Well, it could be a trend, but yeah, let's go ahead. Well, let's start there. And like those are because Michigan has 2 and Ohio State has 2, right? Maybe more so Michigan. Michigan has to play Ohio State and Michigan State.
Right. Michigan absolutely must play Ohio State and Michigan State. There is no question about that. So who should we make the 3rd Michigan opponent?
Well, I look at there's several that come to mind, and I went through we were doing a poll and it publishes on Thursday, and Minnesota is a historic one, but it doesn't fit here because it was the oldest. The Jug is one of the oldest trophy. It is the oldest trophy, but it's not a competitive series, and it cycled off the annual schedule back in the 90s. So even though it still has more than 100 games, it's not really relevant here.
And I'm going to veto it if I'm the president of Fox and be like, no, we can do better than this.
You can play that one twice every 4 years and be fine. I put for the first edition here, UCLA. And I think getting Michigan, UCLA, I think even though UCLA is kind of like Maryland West right now, it still has kind of a panache to it and I think Michigan brings that out of them because I think you either do that with Michigan, with UCLA or USC, and I'd rather save the other one for USC.
Ari, what would you do? Would you add one of the new ones in that 3rd spot? Would you go, somebody like Penn State?
My initial thought process would be Penn State.
I like the Michigan-Wisconsin game. So one of the guys I do radio with suggested that they should play that game and the winner gets the Upper Peninsula. Like, I think that would be a great annual game, and the winner gets control of the Upper Peninsula.
So here's the thing that is going to be, we ran into this with the SEC too in terms of competitive balance. And I think the thing that people were and are upset about in the Big Ten is that the East is just a harder division than the West, right? But also, if you want to have blockbuster matchups, you have to put the best teams or the best programs against each other. So, like, to me, the Michigan Penn State game is one of the best games of the Big Ten every year, but then you'd be putting yourself in a position where Penn State would get Michigan State, Ohio State, and Michigan, and then Michigan would get Ohio State, Michigan State, and Penn State, and that wouldn't be fair. So I don't think we should care about that. But if you're talking about what I would want as a viewer, I would want to see Ohio State, Michigan, and Ohio State, Penn State every year, and
So
Michigan, Penn State every year. Those three teams.
But see, here's my thing. I feel like we can spread the wealth without them all playing each other every year. Because we can have Penn State play somebody else. We could have Michigan, UCLA. I like, but I think we can do better than that. I think we can. And I realize you want to match UCLA against a kind of old line Big Ten program. But what about if we put Wisconsin here? And I like that. I like that game. I don't know.
But then you take Wisconsin. You take Wisconsin off the board then, because then they have Minnesota, Iowa, and Penn State, and then they're done, right?
Well, they'd have Minnesota and Iowa.
What did I say? Minnesota, Iowa, and Michigan.
Yeah.
So they would be finished at that point.
I'd be fine with that.
And then you put Penn State would be done then too, right? Because they'd have Michigan State, Ohio State, and Wisconsin. Or are we not? Because Penn State has to play.
God
Michigan
has them
State,
with
right?
Rutgers, but I'm not putting Rutgers is in Maryland. They're going to play each other, and this is what we did in the SEC, where there were some schools at the end where we're sorry, but these games are more winnable. So quit complaining.
Yeah, and we can't separate Michigan State and Penn State, can we?
Well, we could. The one thing that I did this more on what I envision happening as opposed to what I'd like to see happening. And what I envision happening is everybody gets one automatic, you're going to play this team till eternity. And even though Penn State and Michigan State don't necessarily regard each other as supreme rivals, they've kind of been shoehorned there. I think that's probably the one where, well, okay, I guess we are. And they kind of move on, because Penn State, in our vote, and it makes sense, they want to play Ohio State every year, and that's generally on average the second highest rated regular season game in the Big Ten is Ohio State Penn State. So you want that game. It's a rivalry, and you want to kind of throw a bone to Penn State, and likewise Michigan State is adamant wanting to play Michigan, probably less so on Michigan's part. But that said, so I think that's why I look at it this way. Now if you want to break them up, that's fine. I view Michigan State in the same venue. We used to make a joke at where I used to work that Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Iowa are three polar bears fighting over the same sheet of ice. So I look at them as pretty equal programs here, not necessarily vaulting Michigan State with Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan as supreme power.
But I think they get the benefit of the doubt there a little bit, because of their affiliation in the Big Ten East and how we've come to view them the last 10 years, and how well frankly, they've competed in that division.
Well, they competed in the were they in the Legends?
No, I'm saying, but the last 5-7 years, Michigan State has been one of the more consistent teams in the Big Ten East. I mean,
it's actually opposite of that. They've been everything from 3-9 to 11-2 in the last 5 years. Yeah. So they've had some great years, like 2 years.
They just had transcendent years when Penn State really only had one.
So I'm gonna save UCLA. I'm gonna make Wisconsin Michigan's third, and so that means. So does that mean we've filled Wisconsin? I think we fill Wisconsin at that point, right?
Yeah, Minnesota, Iowa, Michigan.
Okay, okay, and Michigan State now we have Michigan, Penn State, and who?
I threw Maryland there. That was, again, a kind of a throwaway. I have no problem if you want to say, hey, UCLA, that'd be a good color.
I think UCLA would be a good,
that.
Because I don't care. I'll say it right now. I don't care what happens to Maryland and Rutgers and Indiana and Purdue. We'll figure them out at the end.
Yeah.
So,
as Ari said in the SEC one, Vandy, if you don't like this, win more games. And we'll give you something.
And then this also puts you in a position where you actually could win more games too.
Right.
So that's good. And, forget competitive balance. I like the idea of UCLA and Michigan State, because I don't think we could continue this. The one game that I will die on the hill for on this of the non-negotiable games. Yes, that has to happen.
Okay. Let's go to the Buckeyes now.
Rekindling of the 70s Rose Bowl rivalry, but also you want to create ratings and indoctrinate
Yep.
the new program. And I mean, that's a must.
Oh, so Ohio State is the ultimate ratings driver in college football. Is the single best ratings driver there is. Ohio State has to play the 3 best ratings teams it can play. Michigan, Penn State, USC. That has to be the 3.
Although the Michigan State game has also been very good for Ohio State as well, because they've been a pretty big thorn in
It
their
has,
side,
but we're gonna get 2 of those every 4 years.
Yeah, and USC is just, who doesn't want to watch that game?
Like Michigan State, way more, and obviously we're gonna play that. Like that's getting played no matter what. But that one is way more fun, just in terms of hatred and everything else. So yeah, Michigan, Penn State, USC playing Ohio State.
Which is
done.
a tougher schedule for Ohio State, but frankly, in the expanded playoff world, who cares? Like they could lose 2 of those games and still make it.
Yeah, I mean, they're still going to play 6 other teams in the Big Ten, and you might just say you're going to play Purdue, Indiana, Illinois, Rutgers, Maryland, and Nebraska, or something like that.
But who doesn't want to see an Ohio State schedule that has USC, Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Michigan on it?
This is going to be. I mean, that is a blockbuster. Like if you're the Fox executives, that is exactly what you brought USC in the league for. That's what you want right there. Scott, can I ask you an Iowa question? I know you're a little Iowa out, but
how many points are they going to score this year? No, I'm kidding.
326.
How many Iowa fans would like to see an annual Iowa Penn State series? Because I kind of want one.
It's one of those series where I think it's one of the best in the Big Ten. You look at almost every single game. They've come down to the end. They've had some moments. I mean, Saquon Barkley, what he did at Kinnick a few years ago was just unreal. Over the years, it's
Adrian Claiborne blocking the punt in the whiteout. Like, come on, this has been a great series.
And even 2 years ago, where you have Penn State players that were injured / we don't know, and then you had the coaches chirping at each other after the fact. I mean, it would be a great annual series. I'm glad that they had that in that first East versus West. It was 4-2, but in favor of Penn State. But one of those games was decided on the last play of the game on a touchdown pass.
Can we do that? I think that would be one, because here's the thing with especially with these old line Big Ten schools, the huge alumni based Big Ten schools. Ohio State and Michigan are their own animal, but Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Iowa, Illinois, like all of these schools have massive alumni bases. And when the games are good, everybody clamors on. Like, and Penn State and Iowa play good games. That's why I think that, like, I think Penn State's should be Ohio State, Michigan State, and Iowa.
I tell you what, I won't kick out any of the 3 because it would wound Iowa. I would think if Iowa fans had a choice, you got to keep the Gophers. They have the greatest trophy in sports.
But this is a problem. If I put Iowa here, we're going to lose Nebraska or Wisconsin, and I don't know if we can do that.
Nebraska would be the one that I think people would vote out. But the Big Ten has put a lot of equity in that series. Black Friday and
all right. So give me an alternative to Iowa for Penn State opponent.
Okay, yeah. I don't know if good games, but I think that Iowa's basically set.
Okay, well, all right. Let's give Iowa, because you're right. That is probably the easiest. That's sort of like Texas was in the SEC, where this all makes sense. So we'll go Minnesota, Nebraska, and Wisconsin for them.
I would, for Penn State's number 3, USC.
Okay, I like it.
Remember Sam Darnold going head-to-head with Trace McSorley in the Rose Bowl, and it went right down to the end.
And
this is the game where the over was like 197 points?
Yeah,
yes.
It was crazy.
Yeah. And this is one similar to what we said with the SEC. We don't need to look at this as a 50-year plan. There are certain games that are never going to get moved. Like, certain teams will always play each other. But some of these, like Penn State, USC, let's say USC plays 2 amazing games against Wisconsin in that 4-year period, and you go, you know what? Let's match USC and Wisconsin every year for the next 4 years. We can do that. Like, there's no reason you can't do that.
I just want USC's all 3 of them to be Rutgers, Maryland, and another one of the most further east
Penn
geographical
State.
team. Penn State, yeah.
The worst one to get to, that would probably be Penn State or
Well, that
or
means we
maybe
finish
Purdue.
that if we're putting USC with Penn State, which I agree is a massive ratings bonanza, I'm happy with that. That means we're done with USC. USC has UCLA, Ohio State, and Penn State.
Which is exactly perfect. Yeah.
I am good with that.
Remember what Jim Delaney did with Nebraska when Nebraska joined the league. He had them in the Legends division. They were playing Michigan. They were playing Iowa, Michigan State. Their crossovers that year were Ohio State and Wisconsin. They opened their first Big Ten game was at Camp Randall at night when Russell Wilson was the quarterback, and the fans ended up chanting Big Ten football at him the whole time.
So Domer in the chat says it seems cupcakes play cupcakes and big dogs play big dogs. Great TV ratings, but many argue that it isn't equitable and leads back to the current mismatch in East-West. No, it doesn't lead back to any mismatch in divisions because there are no more divisions. And you know what it does is allows those bad teams to lose fewer games.
And it gives us the better product, which is the entire point of the sport, right, Andy?
Yes, it's an entertainment product. So we're going to try to entertain you. All right, let's go to Nebraska now. So we were just talking about them. We've got Iowa as one, which makes perfect sense. Should we put UCLA with Nebraska?
Yeah. I think for multiple reasons.
Color game too. Uniform game.
You know, they looking at it, Nebraska in the Rose Bowl, you know, that red with that background of the San Gabriel Mountains, it looks good. They've had kind of a little bit of a history there. I think that would be a good one. The interesting one to me, and I put it, and this is where it likely would land, is with Minnesota and Nebraska. And this is why I think this is what they could do is, hey, for your first 4 years, you get Minnesota. But what happens if Matt Rule takes Nebraska back to being Nebraska and PJ Fleck's program kind of flounders?
Right. You're going to want the freedom to put Nebraska against Michigan or Ohio State.
Right.
If you can.
You know, or USC. And the other thing is with UCLA, you do get, that is the closest geographic school to the West Coast. So you're only flying 3 hours instead of 5 every year.
So for the other Nebraska opponent, would that be Minnesota? Does that make the most sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The bit of, what is it? The chair that got broken.
Bits of broken chair. Exactly.
You know? Mm-hmm.
All right. By the way, Braden Gall is the guy. I couldn't remember which of my radio co-hosts had come up with the Michigan and Wisconsin play for the Upper Peninsula every year. Yeah. Braden Gall is the steward of that idea. So, all right. So we're moving down the line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We've completed the set on.
Wow. So, okay. So who do we have left here?
Let me review what we've got so far, because this is, I know if you're listening in podcast form, this is hard. So
it's hard to co-host it too.
Well, maybe I should just be putting this in our chat.
In a Google Doc, yeah.
Yeah. But Michigan has Ohio State, Michigan State, and Wisconsin. Wisconsin has Minnesota, Iowa, and Michigan. Michigan State has Michigan, Penn State, and UCLA. Ohio State has Michigan, Penn State, and USC. By the way, I'm so excited just saying this out loud. Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan State, USC. Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, Wisconsin. USC has UCLA, Ohio State, and Penn State. Nebraska has Iowa, UCLA, and Minnesota. UCLA has Michigan State, Nebraska, and USC.
And Minnesota is done too.
Yeah, we've got Minnesota. That's what I was about to say. So Minnesota has Nebraska, Iowa. Who's the other one?
Wisconsin.
That's right. Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. So we're more than halfway through. We're rolling. Who should we do next?
Illinois.
Illinois. All right. All right.
So Northwestern's
we've not scheduled Northwestern or Illinois against anybody. So yeah, we got to be Northwestern. The battle for the state.
Illinois, Purdue.
Okay.
In Indiana.
That's what makes the most sense of the three. I mean, they play Northwestern now for the Abe Lincoln hat. The Land of Lincoln trophy. It used to be the Sweet Sue Tomahawk, but that was.
Let me ask you this, Scott. Who is Chicago's Big Ten team?
Wisconsin.
Everybody but Northwestern.
I was going to say Michigan, but
Wisconsin.
Michigan State, Iowa, Wisconsin. Purdue to some extent.
I just want to know how much money in advertising dollars has been spent by both of those two teams to have that campaign. And to fail miserably, both of them.
Illinois probably is. I mean,
and there's also no talent in football in Chicago for the most part.
And
there is some, but it goes to.
It's not like it's Atlanta. Let's put it that way.
No.
Yeah. I mean,
it's basketball territory is what it is. It's pretty funny. I mean, to see that the Chicago's team, because you go on a Saturday in the Chicagoland area and you're going to see red for Wisconsin. You're going to see blue and, maize and blue for Michigan. You're going to see black and gold for the Hawkeyes and green for the Spartans because, hey, Mark Hollis, it's interesting. When they organized Legends and Leaders, Hollis went to the Big Ten and said, I'm adamant about playing Michigan every year, but the other team I want to play every year, Northwestern, so we can be in Chicago. And recruit there. And
makes sense.
I was over Penn State and they got him. And then after the Legends and Leaders expired, then they got him for 6 years in the East versus West crossovers.
Well, this is the part where people get mad. And I feel like, with the SEC, we were just kind of filling in here toward the end. I like what we did with the SEC. And you guys actually had me put LSU with Ole Miss. When I did it for the column, I put Mississippi State with LSU and then Ole Miss with Auburn because I was trying to create the storyline thing. Ole Miss playing Hugh Freeze.
The Freeze Bowl.
But I would have been fine switching those up. It would have worked out either way. But I realize if you're Vandy, if you're Kentucky, if you're Missouri, you're like, oh, you guys are just – but think about what they're trying to do at the top. They are trying to create these massive games, these 4 and 5 and 6 and sometimes over 10 million viewer games. Those, like, one of those is better than 5 1 million viewer games.
Right.
You got to remember that. Yeah. So that's the hard part. So
yeah, I mean, that's true because you could just take an Illinois Purdue game and put it, hey, you're going to play on Friday night on the Peacock, and you're going to stream it. So you're fine with that. That's where it's going to land anyway. And Illinois, Ohio State, which has a huge history, but not much, it's pretty hammer nail-ish, so I don't think that you're losing much if you're not playing it every year. I mean, that one, they actually played every year from 1914 to 2003. Yeah. And before it cycled off because of the Illabuck, but it almost got lost in Ohio.
Well, and that's the thing we were talking about with the SEC. Like it's not the same in the Big Ten in terms of the politics, but in the SEC, you had Kentucky and Mississippi State and some other schools going, well, we want to stay at 8 because we want to be able to schedule for bowl eligibility. So the drawback is we're not giving you annually some superstar team that's going to sell out your stadium for sure. But you're also going to get fixed opponents that you can probably beat in a given year. Or that you're going to have a more even matchup.
But at least it allows a situation where one of the teams, if they are headed in the right direction more so than the others, a chance to separate from the bottom of the pack.
Right. And there's also 6 other schedule spots where you have a very good chance of drawing a superpower. And that's the thing. Like, if you get a year where Ohio State and Wisconsin are coming to your stadium, like you're going to sell some tickets.
Also too, like in a world where 12 teams make the playoff too, you're also not even penalizing the teams at the top for playing those high rated games in terms of
right. And that's the only reason we're doing this. Like this is still a 14 playoff. I don't feel comfortable doing this. I think those schools would push back very hard against this. I think if you pitch this to them now, they don't care. They're like, sure, whatever.
Yeah, let's do it.
Right.
So,
there's just, I think some of these teams the SEC needs to go to 9. I mean, there's just no question.
Yeah. I don't think there's any way they don't. We discussed this and I've been very outspoken on that. Like if you have A&M and Texas in your league and you don't have them play football every year, that's just the stupidest thing you can, and like every
you are stupid
should be fired. Yeah, that's what I wrote. You are stupid if you don't do that. So
it's not the other fact. When
dramatic
you have
in the Big Ten, but
well, in the Big Ten, teams like an Iowa gets hammered for a non-conference schedule, but it's like you're already playing 9 Power 5 teams in
Mm-hmm.
your league, plus Iowa State.
Well, and Iowa State's been good since Matt Campbell's been there. So, like, that matters.
Right. And so people, well, you got a cupcake schedule. It's like, well, compared to the SEC, where there are a few teams that play 8 games and sometimes not another Power 5.
I used to love to blow people's minds when they would talk about Florida's non-conference schedule, and they'd be like, well, they haven't left the state for a non-conference game since blah, 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 blah. And they're actually doing that finally. They're going to Utah this year. But I said, oh, can you name me another team that had to play a top 4 team in its non-conference every year from 1987 to 2000? And they're like, excuse me? I'm like, yeah, Florida State was like the most dominant program in college football for that stretch. They had to play them every year. So but like with Iowa, yeah, you got to play Matt Campbell's Iowa State team and 9 conference games. You're challenging yourself.
You got 10 Power 5 opponents, but here's the thing we know, and that is college football programs, conferences, they could run the bowl system. What they could say is, look, anybody who plays 10 Power 5 opponents should only could reach bowl eligibility with 5 wins instead of making it 6 and 6. So therefore, the SEC gets what it wants, which is more inventory for ESPN, more revenue, and then you get that opportunity to play that extra game. I don't think I'd have a problem with that. A 5 and 7.
Well, you know who loves us right now, if they're listening? CBS and NBC executives.
Mm-hmm.
That paid a buttload of money for the number 2 and number 3 choice in this league. And
I also think too that part of that money was like to anticipate this happening.
I mean, number 2 and number 3, and here's the thing. You think going into the season or going into the selection of the games, well, this will be the best one. Sometimes you get a blowout and the one you think is going to be the best and the second best or third best winds up being the best. Like, there are going to be some bangers 3 and 4 deep in this schedule every weekend.
Yeah, no question. You're going to get a Michigan State the same time as you get Ohio State, Wisconsin, or USC, Iowa, or something like that. And then, hey, by the time you get to 3 and 4, you're in good shape. And I think the SEC, of course, has that. When they go to 16, it's just going to be probably that on speed. So I love the way this is going to work out. I'll tell you what, though, you look at the Big Ten schedule this year in week 2, and if you're CBS or NBC, you're bawling your eyes out because there is nothing.
CBS is like, we paid how much for this?
It is garbage week 2.
But don't worry, CBS, it's coming.
Every decent, and I mean, there aren't really any good games, but every decent Power 5 matchup is on the road. So you have like Illinois at Kansas, Iowa at Iowa State. I think Nebraska's at Colorado. So you have these games. I mean, who wouldn't want Deion's debut at home?
Yeah.
But it's not going to be under the Big Ten purview. So the rest of them, I think the best one will be like Youngstown State at Ohio State. So they're going to be hurting in week 2.
Let's finish up the league here. We've got Indiana's got Purdue and Illinois. We finished Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue, Indiana. Indiana has Purdue and Illinois. I gave Maryland, Rutgers, and Rutgers, Maryland, because congratulations.
Yeah.
But we've got to finish them out as well. Who wants to go to Chicagoland? Who wants to go to Evanston?
They went in the old days when they had a 2-team protected series. The one that got pushed at the very, very end was Purdue Northwestern, because Purdue is about a little over 2 hours away from the Chicago.
I like that one. I like Purdue Northwestern. I like if we're actually going to be historical about it, the early 2000s basically cradle of offensive innovation between those two schools, with Joe Tiller at Purdue and Randy Walker and Kevin Wilson at Northwestern. Like, I like that. Let's do that. Okay, so let's add.
But we've got one problem coming up, and that is the way it's setting up is Maryland and Rutgers would have to play each other twice in the same year.
No. They wouldn't. Somebody's going to play Northwestern, because I've got Purdue plays Illinois, Indiana, Northwestern. Indiana is playing Purdue and Illinois. We can give them one of Maryland or Rutgers. So let's give Indiana, Maryland.
Okay.
All right. So we give, and so we're going to give Maryland, Indiana, and Rutgers. All right. And then Northwestern's got to play one more team.
Rutgers.
Okay. There you go. We're
and
good.
but then you look at Maryland and Rutgers. Maryland's playing Rutgers, Indiana, and nobody. And then
Well, how did we come to this? This doesn't work this way.
it's because Rutgers is cycled off Penn State and Maryland cycled off Michigan State. So,
but we've already filled everybody else. How is this happening? I told you we're a bad at math podcast.
This is a very bad math. I wish
coming
I could
to a head right now. Like, how is this possible?
I can fix this very, very quickly.
Okay, good.
Illinois will play Rutgers.
Okay.
And instead of Indiana, and Indiana will Illinois will play Maryland, and Indiana will play Rutgers, and not.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
Good job, Scott.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The two people that we've had work us through this are way smarter than us.
Well, that's why we bring them on, Ari, because otherwise we'd never get this done.
If you would have been like, fix this problem, Ari, we would be here till I don't know, until I solved a Rubik's Cube or spent a year in jail. I don't know which one it is.
Yeah, this is the problem. Ari and I are not built for math. That's like, I'm just staring at I've got them written down in a file.
I'm not even looking at it, and I got anxious when he started saying that.
I'm looking at it, and it's like the opposite of Zach Galifianakis with the numbers coming at him in The Hangover.
There's no numbers. It's just you're standing there with a blank stare. Yeah.
I'm just like, what do I do? I've messed up Maryland and Rutgers again, which is probably how the Big Ten feels a lot.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people feel that about Rutgers in the Big Ten, but
I'm just so glad you solved it for us, Scott. That makes me so happy.
Yeah. Well,
so we've got
down at the very, very end, so I don't think that anybody will be too crushed if we've got Illinois instead of playing Indiana, they're playing Maryland. I don't think TV.
Yeah, at the bottom, what happens? That's not our goal here. Our goal is to make it hot at the top and make the bottom work their way into hotness.
Exactly. And look, you can win. Like if you have if there's a really good Rutgers team, then it should probably go 3-0 in these games. And then you've got to go what? 3-3 the rest of the way in the league, and you win your non-conference games, and you're having a good season.
You're having a great season for them. You'd be 9-3 and probably going to like a Citrus Bowl or something. I mean, that's a historic year for Rutgers, and that's not a problem at all for them. And I think here's the thing: people are going to look at Ohio State and going, "Oh my God, you got to play Michigan, Penn State, and USC," but you're going to play a mix of the others too. And so it's not like you're going to be so overwhelmed. They're not going to say, okay, you're going to play Michigan State, Iowa, Wisconsin.
Well, and we're going to feel like Ohio State was more tested.
And we're going to get to watch better games with more popcorn.
Yeah. Yes. I listen, just as when we did the SEC one, I cannot tell you how excited I am for this. This looks amazing as I'm thinking about it as it breaks out into a weekly grid. And again, if I'm a CBS or an NBC executive, obviously a Fox executive, doing backflips right now.
Here's the thing that you're not accounting for too. Like there's some big time non-conference games on the schedule in the next few years between the Big Ten and the SEC as well. So you're getting all these games where you've come up with our fake schedule grid, but then you're also, getting those non-conference games too. So you might have 9. I mean, all I want really is the big dogs of the sport to play more than 3 interesting regular season games a year.
And I think you're getting that. You're going to get that. I mean, if you look at what Georgia was doing with their non-conference, now we'll see if they keep all those games now that the SEC is probably going to go to 9. But I think the better programs were going to do that. I think the Tom Izzo, to borrow a Big Ten basketball coach's model, the Tom Izzo scheduling model is coming to football, where they're going to be programs that are like, we're good every year. We get that we might lose some of these, but we'll make the playoff if we go 9-3 against this schedule. So we're going to do it anyway.
Right.
Yeah. And it's like your mid-majors who decide, you know what, we're going to bulk up in the non-conference and put ourselves in a position where if we accidentally lose the conference tournament, we still got a chance. And that's what the Big 12 and probably the Pac-12 and ACC need to look at, is we need to bulk up the non-con, because if we lose our championship game, we still have an outside chance to make the top 12.
Oh, guys, and one piece of news that has happened while we were doing this, Todd Monken obviously headed to the Baltimore Ravens, the Georgia offensive coordinator. Our Seth Emerson reporting that multiple sources have told him Mike Bobo is going to be promoted to offensive coordinator at Georgia. Obviously, Bobo, former Georgia quarterback, former Georgia offensive coordinator under Mark Richt. Run the damn ball, Bobo. I don't think we have. I actually think Mike Bobo is a very good offensive coordinator. I do enjoy the run the damn ball Bobo joke. And I do remember that time at South Carolina when they were right on the goal line and he called a pass and it was a disaster. That said, I think given what they have and what he likes to do, it's a pretty good marriage, and it's a guy Kirby Smart trusts. So
Yep.
I'm good with that. And it goes back to what we were saying when Nick Saban was looking for coordinators and ended up hiring Tommy Rees. He didn't have anybody in the family he could promote. Like Kevin Steele was a guy he'd worked with before, so he went and hired him. Kirby lost his DC last year, had people ready to go, move them up, loses his OC this year, has somebody ready to go. Georgia has become Alabama. Like that is what happened.
Another piece too, Andy. Utah is keeping Andy Ludwig.
That's How about that? How about Kyle
And
Whittingham?
Notre Dame is back to the drawing board. So
yeah. So it will be interesting to see what Notre Dame does. We mentioned the other night Harry Hiestand retired during the Super Bowl, the offensive line coach. So they're still in a state of flux, but they got a quarterback. Sam Hartman's there doing deadlifts still. I'm assuming he's just been doing deadlifts since he posted that video when Tommy Rees took the Alabama job. So they'll be just fine. But guys, thank you so much for listening. This has been a pleasure. Scott, thank you for enduring all of our Brian Ferentz questions.
It was fun.
No, it wasn't.
Well, buckle up, buddy, because we got a whole other year of this.
The whole season. Right? I'm getting that 25 graphic prepared. We're going to put that up in like May.
We just need yodelee in the background, exactly. Like on The Price is Right.
Cliffhanger on Price is Right is one of my favorites. We'll talk to you later.